Hey, everybody, this is Kenny. Welcome back to another edition of the Leading from the Middle podcast. This is the podcast for middle managers who want to develop themselves, develop their teams, and improve their results. Leaders, do you know how important your voice is? Do you know that everything you project vocally has a lot to do with the influence that you have as a leader? Don't believe me? Just watch. Listen in to this episode. I got to speak with the expert for vocal coaching for speakers, leaders, and visionaries. John Henny joined me today. And John talked about how you build more awareness around how to use your voice, how your voice will help you connect with your teams and help you connect with people emotionally. So much more. You don't want to miss a second of this fascinating conversation. Let's get at it.
This episode is brought to you by Kitcaster. Kitcaster books you on top podcasts. How do funded startup founders attract prospects and talent? Podcast interviews. How do entrepreneurs with exits find new deals? Podcast interviews. How do C-suite execs differentiate in crowded markets? Podcast interviews. Kitcaster books you on top podcasts. Click the link in the show notes for a special offer. Celebrate good conversation.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of the Leading from the Middle podcast. And I tell you, I cannot wait to have this conversation with this gentleman tonight because it is something that is so needed with our leaders. So I'm going to get right to him. The expert for vocal coaching for speakers, leaders, and visionaries, John Henny, has joined us today. John, it is so great to have you here. Thank you so much. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Oh man. I really want to get into what vocal coaching actually is, why it's important. But first, I really would love to hear a little bit more of your backstory because I suspect that there's something in your backstory that really prompted you to want to jump into and help leaders and visionaries and speakers with vocal coaching. So tell us a little bit about your backstory and what led you to this place.
Yeah, so my background is a musical background. I actually didn't think I could sing. So I took up drums when I was about 11 years old, and I ended up playing professionally my late teens, all through my 20s. And in my early 20s, I had a roommate who came home and he said, "Hey, I just started studying with this guy who studies with Stevie Wonder's voice teacher." And I went, "That sounds good to me."
Yeah.
So I jumped in and then I ended up moving on. I worked with Stevie Wonder and Michael Jackson's voice teacher. And at a certain point, I moved from the drums to being a singer. And I also started teaching. I found that, hey, these things that help my voice, I can actually help others. And then what I found was, wait a minute, these things and these devices that help singers really craft a compelling performance help speakers as well. And just looking into speech and music, we really don't know what came first. If we first started communicating through singing or if we first started communicating through speech, but they really are extensions of the same thing. And when people start finding the music in their voice and connecting with an audience or a listener on that level, they're much more interesting.
Yeah. Wow. I had never thought and put the two together like you just did. Let's get right into it then. What exactly is vocal coaching?
So it's essentially the way I work is I first bring awareness to the voice. Your voice is the number one connector and communicator of emotion. And we know that human decision is really driven by emotion. We'll go back and try and rationalize it, but emotion is such an important part of communication. And just understanding how your voice connects you to other people. I was looking at a study out of Yale, and they took two subjects and wanted them to be able to empathetically understand what the other person was feeling and test their accuracy on that. And when they removed the visual element, the accuracy levels went up. That the
Wow.
voice is really how we connect on that emotional level.
Mhm.
Once you have that awareness, it's then finding how your voice works best. We're all different. We each have our unique vocal fingerprint, but each of our voices are going to work optimally when operated in the right way. And so I give simple but very effective exercises to find the right speaking pitch, get the breathing really efficient, and especially resonance so that the voice really sounds good and carries.
Wow. Wow. And so this sounds to me like it should be very, very beneficial for leaders, especially when they're speaking to either a small group or a larger group. So what are some challenges that you've seen for leaders maybe connecting just a little bit better with their audience? Let me take a step back on that. I'm going to save that question for a second. What are some things that you do to help people really find what their right pitch, what their right voice is? Is it part of their personality? What are some things, basic things that leaders can do with you that'll help them find what their right vocal tone, pitch, everything is?
Yeah, I mean it's a process, yeah, but very simple thing that you can do. And one of the most important things you can do is to find your proper speaking pitch. And very often, what people do, because we do associate a deeper voice with authority,
Hmm.
but we try and find that depth and richness through dropping the pitch. And what happens is we end up often speaking too low, and then people really can't hear us. Whereas if you adjust the vocal tract and the resonance, so it can sound like I'm speaking on a kind of a high pitch, but I'm going to stay on the exact same pitch, but just change my vocal tract. And suddenly my voice is deeper and richer, but I'm on the same pitch.
Yeah.
Um, so finding that pitch is really a process. You can just go like you're agreeing with me. Mm-hmm. Try that for me.
Mm-hmm.
Good, good. Now I want you to just do that a little slower. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Good. Now place your hands here, just around your nose and mouth. All right, you were just making this little frame. And as you go up, you'll feel, as it passes through, it will suddenly get kind of buzzy and excited here. Mm-hmm. It's right there for me. You feel it?
Yeah.
Right there. Yeah. So from there, say, mm-hmm, yes, that's right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right from that, where you really feel that buzz. Yes, that's right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Good. Now say, yes, that's right.
Yes, that's right.
There you go. Yeah. And so what you do to find that, you'll feel where it gets, the resonance really kind of kicks in and you'll get that buzzy sensation. And then say something that's emotionally charged and enthusiastic. Absolutely. Yes, that's right. And what you feel, that's probably where you should be speaking. It's a pretty good way to try and find the right pitch. And what we will do is, and especially on Zoom meetings, we'll start to just kind of lose energy and then the voice starts to drop. And then there's no connection in the voice. You really start to lose the music in the voice and people's attention will start to wander.
Wow. John, that all makes so much sense. It's funny. I was going to ask you, I have that written down as a question about in virtual world, how this plays in. But I really want to, I'm fascinated that you said that you really want people to connect with their voices emotionally, leaders really to show that emotion. What are some of the challenges that you've seen with leaders really connecting emotionally or engaging even more through their voice with their people or when they're making a presentation?
I think it is the lack of making deliberate, intentional choices. So intentions are something from the acting world. when you're going to do a scene, rather than looking at your dialogue and going, I'm going to be sad, because that's actually going to be flat and there's nothing to move you forward. What the actor will do is say, I'm going to reveal, I'm going to rebuke, I'm going to expose. So when you have to do a presentation, rather than saying, oh, I'm going to be excited, what you do is you say, no, I am going to educate. I am going to celebrate. And when you take these very deliberate emotional choices and then allow your voice to find the music of that emotion. And what I will often tell people to do is go find a space where they feel no one can hear them, so they can feel free to be a bit silly, and take part of what you have to talk about, and I call it pretending to be in the world's worst musical. And I want you to sing it, and just sing it as badly, make a joke of it, have fun with it, but then make the song kind of exciting, or make the song a bit of a ballad, make it, try these different types of music, and then go ahead and say it again and see if some of that music doesn't carry through in your voice. And if it does, you're just more compelling to listen to.
Yeah. Wow. And even just the choice of words, where you change some of the words, even that it is what goes first. Now, if you're changing the words and your emotions are changing.
Yeah. Words are a funny thing, because another part of this experiment that I read out of Yale is they had speakers say the exact same 7, but 7 random words. Yellow, book. And a panel of judges were able to judge the social status of each speaker pretty accurately. That's actually kind of frightening.
Wow.
But your voice reveals so much about you.
Yeah.
So it's not just the words. It really is. If you have this strong intention, if I walk into this room and my intention is to excite, if my intention is truly to inform, and I really think about that, then it's going to carry through in the voice. And we, as social beings, we pick up on these cues, even at a less than conscious level. And you will see great singers. You can take someone who's got a nice voice and they can sing a song, and that's okay. And then a great singer takes that song and you're just absolutely spellbound. They can leave you in a puddle on the floor, because they know how to use these musical devices. They know when they're building up to a point, and then they know when to pull back. And these little devices they use, tempo, range, tone, all of these, they reawaken the listener's attention. The worst thing is when we start to just speak in predictable patterns. Attention is gone. As soon as people know and they can just find the lilt and the patterns in your voice and they can predict them, you become very hard to listen to, even if they want to. We've all been in a situation where somebody is explaining something that we want to learn, and their style and their voice is so dull that we drift away even when we don't want to. So musicians and singers know this. Producers know this. That's why there's always new elements, new little things to awaken and grab your attention.
Wow. That is so fascinating, so amazing, so true. John, what has been some of the benefits that you've seen when leaders really get this? What's a couple of benefits that helps them move their business even forward more?
Well, you are heard. People listen to what you say, and you're able to better hold their attention so that your message has been heard. That's the one word, heard. Yeah. And in business, If you're not heard, if your ideas aren't getting across, if you're not able to convince or persuade, it's very hard to move ahead. It's very hard to make sales. It's very hard to grow your business. My wife she's since left the business, but she was a top sales rep in radio. And she was famous for, back then, they would say, you give good phone. She was able to use her voice in such a way over the phone that she just got people and they loved talking to her, and she sold a lot of ads. And it's the same thing. And they didn't have the advantage of cameras. So that's really the success, is being heard. And then the other thing is just understanding vocal health and understanding how to keep your voice strong, because as you age, muscles tend to weaken, ligaments tend to stiffen. And so the voice gets weaker. And when our voice starts to sound weak, that also projects weakness. And your voice doesn't have to age. It's just like your body. It's inevitable, but you can slow it down a lot. And so if you know how to take care of your voice and exercise your voice, it will see you through.
Wow. It sounds like influence comes into play here when you're putting all these things together. Now, if I put these things together, John, and how do I build more awareness after? And here's where I'm going. There are times, okay, you have a presentation and then you have a discussion and someone might ask you a question that might put you off a little bit. Here's where tone, I think, starts to also matter, because I've seen a lot of leaders and that's where they lose it, right? They're like, what kind of question is that? You know what I mean? And the way they answer it. How do you build that awareness?
So if your intention, when someone asks you a question, even if it's a difficult question, it's a question that you feel that you've answered, even if it's a question where you don't necessarily have the answer, if your intention is to truly inform and your intention is to support the person who's asking, it's going to come through in your voice. Your voice is a bit of a lie detector. And when you are blowing someone off, it's going to come through in the tone of your voice and how you're saying it. So if you're really committed, and it's not always easy, but if you just take a moment and go, okay, what is my intention here? And you very clearly set that intention. And then you've been working your voice, you know how to keep your voice on the right pitch so it doesn't sound dull or disinterested or aggravated. Then you're going to be able to get through that situation much better and impart more confidence and authority with your listeners.
Yeah, I love it. That makes perfect sense to me. How does fatigue tie in here, John? If, I was up late the night before, I have an early morning, meeting and I'm a little bit tired. How does that tie in with how we use our voice?
Yeah, so your voice is tissue, and it's opening and closing. Your vocal cords are opening and closing hundreds of times a second. And people who are maybe public school teachers, or let's say you have to do a day full of presentations, your vocal cords may be opening and closing upwards of 1 million times a day.
Wow.
That's a lot.
That's a lot.
So you need to be well hydrated, because this is the oil for your vocal engine. And if your vocal folds are dry, you're going to get thick mucus. They're going to tend to get irritated. You want to get rest as much as possible. You want to be careful how late you're eating. If you deal with reflux, that's very bad for the voice. But if you've got the meeting and the voice is tired, one of the best hacks, if you will, comes from voice researchers. And what you do is you take a straw, and this one I have here, this is actually a singing straw. These are for vocalists, but you can just grab a couple of cocktail straws, coffee stirrers, or a drink straw. And if it's a drink straw, you might want to just put your finger just a little bit over the tip to create some resistance, or maybe put it in some water and just You're just going to vocalize as you blow through the straw. Make sure no air's coming out of the nose. You kind of play like a kazoo.
Wow. Okay.
And what that does is you've essentially lengthened your vocal tract with this straw and made it very narrow. So all the energy that's going through kind of gets backed up into this little straw, and it reflects back down on the vocal cords, and it's like a little massage. And this, you can even steal away as you're doing a presentation. Maybe you've got a couple of minutes, just do that with your voice, and it can help get you through. The other thing, when your voice is tired, don't let your pitch drop, because when your pitch drops, you lose upper frequencies. You lose the higher frequencies in your voice, which actually have more power and energy. It's kind of like the DJ has gone. And when you're down here, the voice is not going to carry. So what we end up doing is we start squeezing the vocal folds to try and get more energy out of them. And that actually begins to swell them more, which will make you even more tired. And it just becomes a vicious cycle.
Wow. Wow. What great practical advice there. I'm going to use the straw one for sure, because
it works.
Boy, oh boy, I love that. Just a couple, this has been fascinating. And I just love the angle that you're coming at and you're carrying for leaders and to really kind of round themselves off. This is so important. Storytelling. You mentioned a lot that the art of storytelling is very important, and using your voice to do that. Talk a little bit about how important storytelling is from a leadership perspective.
Well, since our earliest days, we've all been storytellers. And so stories not only keep people engaged, but they're a great way to impart information. And stories don't have to be incredibly long. And we all know the pain of somebody who goes through a painstakingly long story. So very often brevity is a key, and even just simple metaphors. Simple metaphors are like little mini stories that you can use to get your point across. Yes. So, and again, when you are telling a story, you may have told it before, but this is the first time they are hearing it. So just as an actor, I'm going to come back to these intentions. Why are you telling the story? Are you telling the story to entertain, to enlighten, to educate, to convince? And if you really hold that intention as you're telling the story, you are going to be more engaged in the story, and the listener is going to be more engaged in the story. So it's very important. It will keep things entertained. So I've been with speakers who have overdone it, and then you start to roll your eyes as another story comes, because it's like, man, come on, I can't spend 6 hours to get an hour's worth of information.
Yes,
but they can be incredibly effective.
Yes, that's so awesome. John, here's my last question for you, and then I certainly want to give you time and space to tell us how people can connect with you, because it's so important that people do. What advice would you give? 2 or 3 tips of advice for leaders that are really just getting their first opportunity to jump into the leadership space? What would be a couple of things that you would say to let them know how vital this is to kind of round them out as leaders as they're just starting out? What would be a couple of pieces of advice that you would tell them?
Just understand that your voice, not words you're saying, but the sound of your voice, the very vibrations of your voice, are having an emotional impact on the listener. And we make decisions based on emotion. So if you just spend some time getting your voice right, a lot of times when we think we have to do a presentation, of course, we worry about our slides and then what we're going to wear, and we may practice our power stances, but we don't think about how the voice, the most important part of the whole process, really falls into it. So don't dismiss your voice. Don't think that you don't have a good voice. And I'm just going to sidetrack slightly here. When people tell me, oh, I don't sing, I always tell them, no, you're always singing. When you're speaking, that's a form of singing. And what we've done, especially since the advent of the recording era, is we have a class of people that we call professional singers. And that's great. They are incredibly talented, wonderful artists. But then people say, so they sing and I don't. And I say, yeah, but does Tiger Woods stop people from playing golf? Why does the professional class of singing stop you from understanding and rejoicing in your voice? So the voice is incredibly important. These vibrations that we feel are really psychologically important. You should really start to fall in love with your voice. Listen what your voice sounds like. And if you need some work to get it sounding better, know that you can have a great sounding voice. You're going to sound like you. I can't turn everyone into Morgan Freeman, but your voice is going to be your unique fingerprint, and your uniqueness is your greatest asset in business and life.
Wow. I don't have anything to add to that. That is just such wonderful, wonderful advice. Oh my gosh. So John, how can people get in touch with you? How can people connect with you?
Yeah, so my main website is John Henny, JohnHenny. And for speakers, go to compellingspeaker.com. And you can even I've got a free download, which is a warm-up cheat sheet, if you will. If your voice is tired, you can just look at that and it'll tell you what to do to get your voice working again.
Okay, awesome. And I'll make sure that's all in the show notes. And I saw the free download, so I'm going to go back in and do that because I can use some help with that. John, this has been amazing. You are doing fascinating work. It is really just another piece to round leaders off, but it is so important. There's so much there for influence and to get your people excited, to get others excited every day, or especially folks that are out there selling. Think about walking into a strange office and your voice just projecting. And I love how you said it's your fingerprint, right? So this has just been fascinating. So I just want to thank you so much for your time and all the great advice that you passed on. Keep doing the work that you're doing. It's really, really important work.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Well, folks, I'm going to leave it there. This has been the Leading from the Middle podcast with Kenny and with John, and we'll talk to you real soon.